really the macro story here is that our body is written with code, biological code, and we are learning to write that code in a very meaningful way.
God, I've seen some of these guys that have founded these startups, genetic optimization on LinkedIn.
Their tagline is "Have your best baby."
Hey everyone, welcome back to Unseen Unknown. Today we are talking about the changing relationship that we have to our bodies, because there is so much going on when it comes to the body space. And I don't care what brand you are, in what category, body will affect you somehow. It is somehow intersecting with whatever it is you are doing in the world. So with so much going on, there's, the question of like, are we actually coming back into our bodies? Are we becoming more spiritual? Is there a more physical experience of the body? Or are we more disconnected than ever with all the technologies that are going on, with all the quantified self movement, all that stuff? We're going to talk about all of it and where we think it lands and why that matters for you. But first, Jean-Louis is going to take us on a whistle-stop tour through all of the insane technologies that stand to actually change the way the body is perceived and experienced.
All right, let's do it. Because I think you can't understand what's happening around the body unless you understand the science. Because, so far, the story of technology has been AI, AI, AI. But if you start looking at the science papers, every science paper uses AI to do that breakthrough science. And so there is this it's genuinely insane, this acceleration of technology. And it's not visible to the public really in a meaningful way yet. But it's behind the scenes, we're building sci-fi nonsense.
When will it be visible to us?
It's starting to. We're just at the cusp of it, but it's just to say that there is this incredible acceleration and we don't quite see it yet, but I really think the next decade or two or three are going to be as much a story of the advancement of biology as they are an advancement of AI. I really think that what we're on the cusp of is just absolutely insane and remarkable. So I'll start with one of my all-time favorite science podcasts, From First Principles. They go really deep into science. I recommend them for a lot of stuff. And they just covered a new paper that came out. It was the non-Mendelian inheritance of DNA methylation patterns in mice. Sounds like nonsense. What it really is saying is that normally when we measure DNA, what happens is we chop it up into lots of tiny pieces and we read those pieces. And you lose tons of really valuable information when you chop it up, which is the inheritance of where did it come from and the epigenetic information. So we don't actually know which genes are turned on necessarily because we chopped it up. And so we just figured out a way to read it really efficiently with all that information still encoded. We go from reading these tiny little snippets to reading super long chains, so we know exactly what parent it came from, and we know exactly what epigenetics are activated or not activated. Which means all of a sudden, when you read the human genome...
It's truly finding the master code.
Well, it's finding the master code, but it's figuring out what is turned on and what is turned off. And more importantly, when you figure out what is turned on and what is turned off when it comes to DNA, you could learn how to turn off and turn on different genes, which is huge because a ton of diseases, a ton of medicine doesn't work because of epigenetic factors.
Oh.
So it's first of all, a bunch of medicine issues there, but then also a bunch of treatments and just figuring out, it turns out it was this gene that was turned off epigenetically that we can turn on. So suddenly, they talk about trauma is stored in the body because even if your grandmother was in a famine, then that affects her eggs, which affects the mother, and that affects you. And so your grandparents' experience through epigenetics affects you.
Yeah.
And that's well documented. There was a study in, I think, Denmark in the famine in World War II, and they show the effects still today. And so the point is just that in even just this one thing, suddenly we are aware in a way that we weren't before. And now, because of awareness, we can start turning off and on all these tools. So that's just one, right? You've got there was a story recently of a guy who cured his dog's cancer using ChatGPT. He spent 10 grand. He created personalized medicine. We are on the cusp of being able to do that in a very meaningful way. Another breakthrough that just happened is using magnets to guide medicine, anti-cancer medicine, to exactly the tumor, in the brain, and then deploy the medicine. So instead of doing chemo, which is...
Is that a major advancement? That seems like crude science.
It is and it isn't. That's a very specific and challenging thing to do. But the problem is chemo is bombing your entire body, whereas this is incredibly targeted. And that's just physical deployment. There's a bunch of other stuff in terms of genetic targeting of and stuff. So cancer medicine, cancer treatment, where there's a whole new suite of tools that are about to be deployed as well. And so AlphaFold, I'm sure you've heard a lot about AlphaFold,
Yeah.
all these new proteins. So now they have this new way of not just figuring out, or the whole list of proteins, but how they fold together, how they interact together.
Okay, just speaking on behalf of the audience, I feel like we knew that like there was the AlphaFold like screensaver and like you could, like the teacher who discovered the fold of a certain protein.
Yeah.
So is this like way beyond stuff we're already familiar with?
This is so much. So one of the big problems is how do proteins interact? If you understand how proteins interact, you are understanding how medicine interacts and how diseases interact. And so now we've got a model where we can actually model how they behave. And so, for example, if another pandemic were to happen, we would be able to develop treatments radically faster because of this technology, like radically faster. It also means it's drug discovery. We can discover drugs in such a faster cadence.
Are we discovering drugs faster now?
Yes. There are some labs that literally would take 5 years and now it's taking a few months. But there's tons of new treatments. And that's just one of the tools. The other tool is organ on a chip. So before, you'd have to do tests in people. And you have to have a whole population of people and do all the tests. But now you can just grow kidney cells and test it on a little chip. So you can have a board with hundreds of different people's kidney cells and you can run tests super, super fast. So all of a sudden, you've accelerated a massive part of the medical trial process. And then you've got like the Zuckerberg-Chan Biohub. So they've invested a ton of money into essentially creating a computer simulation of a cell. And so similar to AlphaFold, these are like the fundamental tools. They're not sexy, they're not interesting to the public. But when you have these, all of a sudden, really the macro story here is that our body is written with code, biological code, and we are learning to write that code in a very meaningful way. So last year, there was a kid born for the first time, and in vivo, in the womb, they used CRISPR gene editing to change which genes were activated to prevent a genetic disorder, which would have massively impacted their quality of life. That's the first time we've done that. There's it blows my mind. There's a whole genetic optimization movement now.
God, I've seen some of these guys that have founded these startups, genetic optimization on LinkedIn. I want to hear about it, but what's interesting is I don't see any of them walking a moral fine line or talking about it from a moral standpoint, when clearly that will be the biggest barrier to adoption.
I mean, we're literally talking about the Apple Store of eugenics, basically. That's kind of the line we're going up to. Their tagline, so the one I think is most notable is Nucleus. Their tagline is "Have your best baby." And you can literally select intelligence, you can select for height, you can select for eye, you can do a lot of selection. And here's the thing, is that like you can also select against a lot of diseases, which is a very desirable thing, but it's a slippery slope. And so we'll get into the futurism aspect of it because it brings up an entire universe of considerations. It is a complex story, but it's just to say that, we are able to write code in the body in a very meaningful way. Another one, so if you've heard of Yamanaka factors, it's the story of like the supposed fountain of youth. It's these different medicines that basically they can essentially tell your cells to partially reverse aging. They kind of return to a prior state. And in a very significant way, they've shown in mice and other mammals to reduce aging. They're now in the first human trials. So we're crossing these thresholds in that like we're getting closer to commercialization of a ton of different stuff. And then the other side of it is the diagnostic piece. So one of the massive problems with medicine is you can only learn what you have data for. And we're so bottlenecked. Like it's just hard to understate how little information you have in the typical medical process. You get a blood test every 6 months. You're trying to paint a picture with like 3 pixels, basically, over such a span, and there's so much context you're missing. So Midjourney just came out with this new ultrasound scanner that's in development, it's a fraction of the cost of MRI. It's not quite as good, but it's really close, and it's going to be just multiple orders of magnitude cheaper. And so what happens is you unlock time series data. When you can study people enough, when you get enough data, suddenly everything makes sense. And I think the experience to model this against is continuous glucose monitors. When you have a continuous glucose monitor, you eat a food and you learn how your body responds. And so now if you think about that, what if that were to happen to your hormones and to all these other areas? All of a sudden, you'd have this fidelity of your health and therefore the control that is really genuinely unthinkable right now. So all this to say that if the body were a machine, we're finally learning to write code on it, like in a very active way. And with CRISPR, you can insert the code and hit run.
Yeah. Let's talk about how people are going to actually experience this in the real world, though. You hear this stuff on the news. When it comes down to the experience of the body, I see it could play out in two ways. Either all of a sudden there's like groundbreaking medications that can change everything, like GLP-1s or, HRT, which came back into use after some more research. Or it's a lot more subtle. Like, you don't choose to live 10 years extra, but like your doctor gives you a better heart medication that you don't say no to, and then like a better, regimen for something else, and he is able to catch something a little bit earlier, and like it's the slow compounding effect of the things that you would normally be doing. Which way do you think is more likely to play out for most consumers in our lifetimes?
So I think there are many layers here to discuss. I mean, the first one is that, well, let's talk about the cultural layer, because I think that's the most interesting one. So many of our values are expressed in our bodies, right? They're deeply encoded about like a certain body implies a certain, set of judgments or values. And all of that doesn't apply anymore. Suddenly if you can change these things in a very meaningful way.
Okay, well, that's okay, we can talk about that, but you didn't answer my question. Which way do you think people are going to experience it more?
I think it's just we're going to gradually remove the things that make us sick, and so
yes,
because I mean that's all it is, right?
Okay.
It's not
escape velocity.
It's
from
not
illness.
living forever because we've built longevity. It's eliminating things that kill us gradually.
Yeah.
And I want to stress, we had lead in our fuel till the 90s. We had asbestos in our homes to the 70s. Like it's not long ago that we were functionally killing ourselves.
So you think people's health span will increase
massively. And that's the thing. Like that's longevity, escape velocity. The idea isn't that suddenly you live forever. It's that you're slowing down aging by about a year per year. And when you do that, you cross this threshold of all of a sudden, like, it's a lot of the kind of the social economics of aging, a lot of things suddenly start to change.
Yeah.
And the point I'm getting at is that like, I don't think like aging is going down. It is going down. I can't remember the exact stats, but like we're living, I think it's like a couple months longer every half decade or something like that. Like, and the point is, it's already been going down for a very long time. Like even if you ignore child mortality, infant mortality is a whole separate issue. If you just look at, if you don't die of disease at a young age, how long do you live, right? And the point there is that like for healthy people, and a lot of it is cost and economically dependent. There's a whole story there. But the general point is because of the science, we are living longer, and we're living longer at a faster rate. And so some point, theoretically, as long as there's not a hard line, and there doesn't seem to be any kind of hard line, those lines meet in terms of the speed of time and the speed of age reduction, And so, I don't know. My guess, honestly, and it sounds crazy, but so is, talking about like conscious AI, that
still sounds crazy, but go ahead.
Well, like literally Anthropic put out a thing the other day about how the way that it reasons is the same as,
That's
conscious people.
That's a whole other podcast that we should have, but go ahead.
My point is just that like, we dramatically underestimate the speed of exponentials and exponential technology. And all I'm saying is that we don't understand really, truly how much AI has accelerated medicine and therefore accelerated this curve. I think it will happen in our lifetimes.
Well, let's talk about the moral piece, because that's where things get complicated and where it intersects with culture, because I wrote a piece about moral static that was, I think, in Adweek or Adreach a while ago. We'll link it in the show notes. Especially when it comes to the body, we see a lot of moral static coming up. And it's this idea, like, if you look in the comment sections, if you look at, like, the op-eds people are writing, the content, the discussions people have with their spouses or their families, or, when we do qualitative interviews with people across the country, what happens is you don't get, like, a strong moral argument against these things. People have a strong moral reaction, and then the conversation ends at the morality. Like, it's not right to take a GLP-1. It's not right to take HRT. It's not right to take whatever. But they can't really give you a logical reason. There's no logical reason left, so they just throw the book of morality at it. And that is creating a real disconnect where, like, not only are we getting these incredible new life-lengthening technologies, but now we have to update our moral codes about what it means to live a good life as well. This is... The only comparative I can find to it is like the plastic surgery discussion. That always brings up a moral discussion. But that maps to morality much more cleanly than living longer. The idea of beautification and beauty standards and ageism and the oppression of women, there's a logical argument. But is there a logical argument against all of these other life-advancing technologies? And I feel like I'm waiting for like the church to say something about it. Like we don't really know what we think.
Well, I mean, this is and it's such a delicate line, right? And I think that like, you can talk about it in terms of like, generally people who are healthier are more attractive, right? And so, like it's beauty and really like, I think one of the things is that suddenly it's the morality of money that becomes front and center in this conversation because, a lot of like, because here's the thing is that like, will longevity, escape velocity arrive in our lifetimes? I think there's a pretty good chance. I think it's above 50%. But will it be accessible to everyone? Most certainly not, right? It's going to be expensive as hell at first.
It feels like it has a little bit of hubris, but okay, fine. Let's entertain
let's say that we get close, there's just that like, and again, like there are a lot of other issues. Like, the one thing is you can't replace the brain. You can 3D print new organs, like that's on the table for the future. There's a lot of things that you can fix, right? Theoretically. Brain is still a big, it's a whole other can of worms. But the point is just that like, it's the economic piece. And it's better to have some people be able to spend on it so that the cost comes down over time, because that's how it always is. Yeah. It's expensive at the beginning and it brings the cost down. So you want that. But it creates a whole disparity. And as that becomes more visible and palpable, the morality of money becomes intertwined in the morality of the body.
Yeah, this is happening at a time where the K-shaped economy and the plutocracy that we have right now is it's interesting that these things are happening at the same time. Okay, so that's the big moral argument, the capital M. There's also the mythological consideration, because with a lot of these, forget even like these huge things on the horizons, just hormone replacement therapies and GLP-1s and the advancement and increasing adoption of psychedelic therapies. These things today are giving people back not just like health and health span, but they're giving back their lives. Yeah. Like years of your life that you would just assume are going to be, a black hole. That's what I saw when my mother went through menopause and perimenopause. I will speak from experience, having been an obese person who's on GLP-1s now. I just assumed I was going to always be kind of half living because I was always so fully ashamed of my body. And I still sometimes think to myself, I cannot believe I'm living so fully I'm fully conscious, and I had kind of given up on that. I thought that's just life after having kids and getting older. And psychedelic therapies, I've seen it do it for loved ones where like it literally gives them, I've experienced it where it gives you a piece of your mental health back. And, I think I've talked about this before. I think it's so interesting how in perimenopause, with all this like time back, we are creating a story of that time. So now perimenopause. Now, there's a very true counter argument that like many cultures for many centuries did have stories around perimenopause, but in the West we didn't. The machinist idea of the body kind of expelled, and there are lots of reasons, but women have been erased from the history of the West in many ways. But now reclaiming that time, giving perimenopause a name and talking like it's like, fuck's given era. And it's all about like, starting your art again and leaving your shitty husband and, traveling. Like we're creating a story. I think that's remarkable because that doesn't happen very often. And I can see stories coming up in so many other of these other spaces.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a story of agency at its fundamental level because, what's happened is that suddenly we have all of these knobs and dials that we can move and turn in a way that we didn't. And again, it's just, I think you have to really look at history and just realize that like it's so crazy recent. You know what I mean? We didn't even really know the microbiome was a thing. We couldn't even like map it until like the early 2010s, let alone like the gut-brain interaction. Like that's our entire branch that turns out to be super complex, involved, like the fascia. Like we're only just discovering the level in which it's involved in, a lot of things in our body. And so the point is that like, if you took a grandparent of yours who's your age, you just time travel them to now, right, from the past, and you tried to catch them up, like how long would it take you before they understood wellness? You know what I mean? Like before they could confidently buy the supplement stack that you have, like it's a PhD basically at this point. Like we don't realize how much we know, but it's just to say that like, they thought that like sugar was fine and fat was bad, like it was just so different so recently. And we have so many dials and knobs and switches and we don't realize how many more we're getting because it's just incremental enough that like, 20 years from now, a number of interventions that we will have on our health and the amount of fidelity we will have, it will feel like a slow boil, so we won't notice it. But all of a sudden, like, our relationship will be so different. Like, I feel like this, let me do this and this and this, and I can tweak 8 things, you know? And so I think it's just that, like, the feeling of agency demands a new story to fit with that.
Okay, I want to talk about that. I think what you're kind of running into here, and if I could describe it as more literally, is we have the intersection of 2 things. You have people literally coming into their body physically, spiritually, metaphysically, with the actual, the time that we're given back through medicines like psychedelic therapy and HRT and GLP-1s. Like, there's a very real, like, return to the physicality and spirituality of the body. Then you have all of these sciences. You have, like, the whole, all the sleep trackers and the DEXA scans and the interface on your phone and the whole, like, life logging movement that kind of separates you from your body. You have things like, it's called orthosomnia, where, like, people literally develop clinical anxieties because they're not getting enough sleep because they can see it in their phone. Like, legitimately, you have the technologies that separate you from it. You have the narratives that bring you back into it. I really think that what brands are missing is that we cannot have futures anymore that separate the body from the mind, from the spirit. People are demanding that these things come together. And I think that can make the pharma or medical or tech industry very uncomfortable. And also, fair. Is it their place to really bring those things together? And then you have the other side that just focuses on the non-scientific stuff. And then it skews into being like snake oil and like a really, bullshit side of the wellness industry that just preys on people.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just that, like, at a certain level of fidelity of understanding, you realize that, surprise, surprise, it's all connected, right? I think we're, like, so betrayed in school by the sense that everything fits cleanly into a different subject. Like, we're going to study this, and then we're going to study this, and there's this assumption that nothing is connected. And obviously it's not true, but the point is just when it comes to the body, that's how we've been treating it, is that, like, these are mutually exclusive, independent systems. And I think we're, to exactly your point, we are reaching a level where it's like, oh, we're now understanding. We're finally coming online. And it's because we have enough data. We're actually starting to understand the mechanisms of these things, where, the epigenetics is affecting our mental state, which is affecting this state, which is affecting our gut, which is affecting our fascia, which is affecting our mood. And it's all interconnected, right? And so, like, what happens there is, by necessity, you reach a sort of ecological mindset in the body, right? Where you understand, and it's not even just like our bodies, but also our environment. Suddenly we understand how that plays out. And I think especially, like, with wearable tech, there are so many breakthroughs, and it's like by accident a lot of the time. Like, Whoop did a whole study with pregnant women and found they can figure out when you're pregnant before you do the pregnancy test because it shows up in the data. And, like, we're discovering things by accident just because we have more data. And so, yeah, I think that we're on the cusp of a deeply ecological mindset in our body because we actually know enough to connect it. And then suddenly the ancient wisdom makes sense in this new light because turns out, truth is truth, and I think that that's where a lot of these things connect.
This is a real cultural vacuum where people want all these different pieces that have lived fragmented, like the spiritual realm was its own medicine state in, the doctor's office in the hospital, the mental part stayed in another place. They want to bring these things together. And that will probably be the future of whatever our cultural narrative is around healthcare in the body, is to bring all these things together. And it's interesting because you start to wonder who will be the faces of that story and that movement.
Well, I think the thing to remember too is that, like, to understand an ecology, it's a lot of work. Like, it's a heavy lift mentally to really process all of those things together, which is why we really couldn't do it till now, And that's why, like, when you look at, like, the frontier of wellness consumers, like, they really do have a remarkable level of understanding of a lot of these systems. And partly, I think AI unlocks that in us too, and that we're aware. And so it's just to say that, like, it is a complex story, but when you understand it, like, it unlocks so much. So yeah, I think that this is the template for the new mental model.
It does explain why we have all these, like, rogue doctors that become huge influencers. If you think of, I don't know if Andrew Huberman really fits this, but a lot of people like, Dr. Mary Claire Haver and others in the HRT space, a lot of doctors in the wellness space, we've really come to trust doctors. Okay, you might not agree with me if you're listening to this, but there's a whole faction of people that really they don't see trust through the lens of like, did you get your medical degree, or is it the right kind of degree, or how long have you been practicing? But are you like waking people up and shaking up the industry? Are you breaking rules? And I can understand, especially for people who had marginalized bodies or oppressed bodies, like, yes, the rules were often weaponized against your body. So that story really makes sense. And actually, sometimes that is how innovation and progress has to be made, is from outside of the system. But I think that's only going to get exacerbated by AI, because you know, we're going to hear all of these stories about these medical advancements, and then you go to your general practitioner and they're like in an old stuffy office with old equipment telling you the same stuff they've told you always. They're not talking about the new drugs, the new tests, or the new anything. And some doctors, in fact, might be a bit reticent to like jump on the bandwagon because things are unproven and whatever. So you're going to have this huge dichotomy that you cannot ignore. These rule breakers promising you an incredible future, companies and brands and products promising you an incredible future that's like sci-fi. And then who you actually go see with your insurance, you know, the doctor who like looks like they haven't, you know, this is not an offense to doctors at all, but you might get the impression that they're not reading the same news as you when it comes to health and medicine. And that's really going to change how we look at medical authority. There are already so many headlines of how medicine, you know, traditional medicine is losing its not trustworthiness, but like its actual equity.
Well, I think there's a deep rift changing to your point in that, like, you know, the AI can say like, oh, by the way, based on a study published 8 minutes ago, like, we just found out this new thing. And like, I think there was a study about like the efficacy of doctors, and basically like, you know, the more time since they graduated, generally the worse they are at certain things. And it's just like information is changing so fast, and it is a fire hydrant, and it's an impossible fire hydrant to drink from as a doctor. It is too much to read if your job was only to read it full time every day. But it is to say that like, we need a new system, and it's a different relationship with information at the consumer level and the doctor level. And I think what's happening is the consumer is moving faster than the doctor is. And so there's this rift between the old guard and the new guard. And so it's going to be very messy in a different way to how it was messy before, you know? And like now it's like, I think what's happened is like all of the old narratives are broken, but the new narratives haven't yet emerged because there's so little consensus because it's so messy. And so we're in this kind of liminal space right now where it's just messy as hell, basically, is the truth of it, is that like, we don't quite know how to think. And then every time we kind of form a mental model, it changes. Yeah. What we do know is the direction of ecological mindset. I think that's a given, that like we're the interconnection of things, extremely high agency and control, and then also just this emerging line of like new possibilities, you know what I mean? Just like unprecedented possibilities, you know, and like we're not yet at the stage where it's like, I mean, really right now, it's still a relatively uninteresting story of just gradually removing things that harm us or that make us sick or, you know, like reduce our health span or kill us, you know, and so it's not interesting, but when you zoom out, it's like, oh, this is really big, you know, and that's when you realize it. And I think there's another side of this, which, you know, we don't need to go deeply into, but I think it's really interesting. GLP-1s are by themselves massively deflationary. You know, they're projected over the next 2.5 decades to save the US economy over $1 trillion at least. And I think that's probably, when you look at all the other factors as well, like you can save an economy an incredible amount of money, which equals genuinely more capital for other things, you know? And so there is a prosperity that comes with this, which is so macroeconomic that you can't see it on the individual level. But it's just to say that like the ripple effects, because I mean, it's our bodies, you know what I mean? It's like, it's so big that I don't think we fully understand the extent of how the ripple effects of this will impact just all these other areas of life.
So many downstream effects. That'd be a good second order thinking exercise. All right, I think we're at the end of time for this episode. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I hope it gave you some idea of just how profound this topic is and how it touches everybody in every category, literally doing anything. If you can help people relate to their bodies in a way that is enriching to them, it's like $1 billion idea. All right, so we have a Substack if you want to go and read more of our thinking on stuff like this. Just look up Concept Bureau on Substack. That's where we're at. If you want to check us out, we're also at exposuretherapy.com or conceptbureau.com. One is our community, the other one is our agency. And we will see you guys next time. Thanks a lot. Bye, everybody.